Record. There we go. We are recording. Right, we're going to hide. So we practiced this earlier. So hopefully this will now work. Right, I'm just doing this because everybody appears down the right hand side of the screen. So we're just hiding. There we go. Right, and now that's good. Oh no, hang on. Right, there we go. Right, so welcome everybody. Claire and I are really excited for everybody to be here. So this is about sharing what we've learned about anxiety through our trainings, and we think it's really important that people understand anxiety, because once you understand what causes the anxiety and what anxiety actually is, it's the first steps to then taking further action to control it. So that's why we've done this as our first masterclass, to kind of put the understanding behind it, because that makes everything a lot easier then to move forward and take control. So I'll let Claire introduce herself first.
Okay, hello everyone. So I'm Claire. So a bit about my background. I suffered with anxiety and depression for consciously, I can remember from about the age of 14, 15, but I know it started a lot before that. I was diagnosed, so I had suffered with panic attacks basically all my life. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder due to some quite traumatic events happening to me over my life. And that all manifested in about, 6 years ago. I had a mental breakdown and had to be signed off work for 4 to 5 months. I couldn't leave the house. I couldn't even leave one room to go to the other room in my house. I couldn't take the kids to school. I couldn't do shopping. I literally couldn't do anything. And at that point, I was having 30 panic attacks back to back. At any one time, so over an hour I was sort of having 30 panic attacks. So that was my sort of rock bottom, and once I hit rock bottom, there was just this glimmer in me that sort of thought, well, if my mind is powerful enough to break me, then surely it's powerful enough to do the complete opposite. And I made a vow to myself then that I was going to do whatever it took to get out of that situation. And fast forward, I found NLP, and that basically changed my life forever. And now I'm a trainer of NLP and hypnotherapy, and a master coach of timeline therapy. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
Thanks, Claire. So over to me then. So my story is kind of a little bit similar. So I've always been a shy, quiet child. My sister did a lot of talking for me when I was younger, which happens quite a lot, I've been told, in our family, people talking for other people. So for me, my anxiety started, I had separation anxiety. I remember my mum telling me from a young age. So I think I've had anxiety for the best part of my life. I don't think I actually realised it was anxiety until probably I was about, well, when I hit rock bottom like Claire did. So everything just got too much, and things were just kind of repeating for me. So I had past events that I would just play over and over. There was bullying, there was domestic abuse at home, and all of these things I just hadn't dealt with. So then on top of that, plus having Ollie, who has autism, it kind of pushed me over the edge a little bit. Then we were having some building work, and my husband went away at the time, and I just remember giving up and kind of going, I can't do this anymore. So I suffered with suicidal thoughts, not that I'd ever take action on that. And I think that's important for people to know as well, is that people do have suicidal thoughts without having to actually want to hurt themselves. And that isn't normal, and I think that's an important message that needs to be out there a little bit more. So I got to the stage where I was on medication. I'd booked into a CBT course, but I had to wait like 8 months. And I just got to the point where I think I decided that I couldn't change the situation. I couldn't change the behaviours of everybody else around me. I could only sort myself out, if that makes sense. So I kind of went on a voyage of self-discovery, met Claire along the way, and she introduced me to the company we did our training with. So we've done all of our trainings together. So we're both NLP trainers and hypnotherapy trainers, master coaches, and we both are trained in timeline therapy, which for both of us, I think, is one of the most powerful tools that we can use as coaches, because it just makes a huge difference so quickly to people's lives. So that's about me. So, right, let's get on and talk about anxiety. So, as you probably know, there's loads of different types of anxiety: social, generalized, health anxiety, phobias, OCD, PTSD, and panic. They're all types of anxiety. And anxiety is, if we go down into the so if we chunk up from anxiety and those labels of anxiety, it's all fear-based. So anxiety is a fear of what might happen. And some of the symptoms, you might have some of these: overthinking, constant worrying, lack of patience, poor concentration, procrastination, avoidance, and sleep issues were the ones that I suffered with. Obviously there's other ones that aren't on there, but they're kind of the main ones that get indicated, and when you go to the doctors with these things, that's when you get your diagnosis of anxiety normally.
Okay, so a bit about fight versus flight. So you've probably all heard this, but I'm just going to go into a bit more detail about it. So the fight or flight response, which it's actually also known as the acute stress response, and it actually refers to a physiological reaction that occurs in the presence of something that's terrifying, that's happening, that's terrifying, and that can be either mentally or physically. And the response is triggered by the release of hormones that prepare your body to either stay and deal with a threat or to run away to safety. In response to acute stress, the body's nervous system is activated due to the sudden release of hormones, and this results in an increase in heart rate and blood pressure and breathing rate, which you'll probably recognise from the things that Claire said on the previous slide. So after the threat's gone, it can actually take up to 20 to 60 minutes for the body to return to its previous levels. So you can probably think of a time when you experience the fight or flight response. So in the face of something frightening, your heartbeat quickens, you begin to breathe faster, your entire body became tense, and you're ready to take action. But the fight or flight response, it plays a critical role. We do need it, in how we deal with stress and danger in our environment. But essentially, the response prepares the body to either fly or flee the threat that you're around. But what's important to note that the response can be triggered due to both real and imaginary threats, and that's the important bit. So that's where anxiety comes in. So anxiety is fear of something that hasn't happened yet. So it is completely imaginary. So for example, a person who is terrified of heights might begin to experience the acute stress response when we have to go to the top floor of a building to attend a meeting or something. His body might go on high alert as his heartbeat and like breathing rate increase. And when this response becomes severe, it may then lead to a panic attack. But all of that was brought on from something imaginary. So in cases like this, the fight or flight reaction is not presenting itself in a rational or a beneficial way. So during a panic or anxiety attack, the body's alarm system is triggered without the presence of danger. So it's imaginary. There's no actual presence of danger, and yet it's being triggered. So if there's an unidentifiable danger, we understand the symptoms. So you can understand why something's happening if you can identify that there's a danger. And we can then fear the danger and not the symptoms. However, if there is no danger and someone experiences things like sweating and changes in heart rate, breathing, vision and hearing, it would seem logical to fear the symptoms, even believing that they're life-threatening, which is like when you have a panic attack and you literally feel like you're going to die. So you're actually fearing the symptoms. So physically, your body is telling you to get ready, that you're in grave danger. And what happens is you assign a mistaken meaning to them symptoms. But these thoughts and actions don't get you out of danger. What they do is they actually reinforce and strengthen the association of a fear. And then a pattern like a behavior is formed, and it starts to repeat itself over and over again. So it just keeps happening. And that's when you have like panic attacks on a regular occurrence, because you're fearing the symptoms. You're not actually fearing the imaginary danger. So the key is to work with the unconscious mind to break these patterns and behaviors and create new ones, so that your fight or flight reactions are just at normal levels to keep you safe when there really is a danger. So it's just a case of working with the unconscious mind and getting it to a point where your fight or flight is as it should be. So if there's something really dangerous, you have to fight or flight, and that's quite normal for us, rather than being like scared of the actual symptoms. And that's part of anxiety, and that's what we need to break down to get through and break down from anxiety. So that's a bit about fight or flight.
Oh, it's not changing. Okay. So the NHS have published some information about the fight and flight and the physiological reactions. So when you're in flight or fight, the lungs, the breathing rate increases, your airways dilate, and more oxygen enters your blood. This will then go into your muscles, so you've got that energy in there to run away. Your brain, the mental activity increases and the alertness increases, and that's for quick decision making. The gut, the activity slows down and the blood supply is reduced, which can affect digestive and cause digestive issues. So a lot of people with anxiety also suffer with IBS, and this is the reason why, because the activity slows down in the because the blood supply is reduced, which causes the digestive system to slow. The heart beats faster and faster and harder to pump the blood containing sugar and oxygen to the muscles to use for energy. Sweating, so you increase in sweating, hands often feel cold, skin can turn pale, hair stands on end and you get goosebumps. Ears and all of your hearing, all of your senses become much more acute. So if you look at what happens when you're in flight or flight, this is exactly the same thing happens in an anxiety attack. So when we are told we have anxiety, our body's actually in fight or flight, when we don't need it to be, because there's no present danger. And fight or flight is a ancient instinct that we needed back then more than so much now, and it was used to keep our ancestors safe. So it's super useful in an emergent situation, but our unconscious mind links, as Claire said, it links past events, and then we focus on what might happen, and it's a fear of what could happen, which triggers this response. And so that is the reactions for flight or flight.
Okay, one of my favourite things. So what is the conscious and the unconscious mind?
Oh, sorry.
Did you not want me to
sorry. No, I did, but the arrow went.
Okay, so the conscious mind is what we're aware of, like as you are now, and it steers and guides us, setting outcomes and deciding directions. The conscious mind has limited processing capabilities compared to the unconscious mind. Your conscious mind is the part of your mind that you're using to listen and process what I'm saying right now. And as you derive meaning from that, from what I'm saying, you establish how the meaning relates to you. Your conscious mind is logical and it likes everything to make sense. The trouble is it wants a label and an explanation for his experience, and it finds it difficult to be in the moment or go with the flow, and it doesn't switch off from internal dialogue, which is like self-talk. And self-talk is one of the things that is at the base of anxiety. So if we are to work on removing anxiety, then we need to bypass the critical faculty, which you'll see on your PowerPoint, and get into the unconscious mind. So you will see on the slide that the critical faculty is between the conscious and the unconscious mind. The conscious critical faculty is based on nothing more than the teachings you received from the moment you were born. So since being born, we've all learned beliefs and acquired behaviour patterns, many of which will have come about from a source that doesn't actually benefit us in the more positive way. So they're basically someone else's belief system. For example, our parents, we often take on the belief system of our parents or whoever brought us up without actually realising it. So to be able to change beliefs and patterns, for example, with anxiety, then we need to bypass the critical faculty and do all change work at the unconscious level. So you need to get below them lines that you see on the PowerPoint. You need to break through them and get into the unconscious mind. And that's basically how hypnotherapy works, and all the techniques we use with coaching clients. Everything is done at the unconscious level. So now that we're into the unconscious mind is everything that is not conscious. So it's basically a container for different thoughts, feelings, emotions, resources, and possibilities that we're not paying attention to at any one time. So our unconscious has amazing processing capabilities compared with the conscious mind. You won't be aware of a lot of the processes that the unconscious mind engages in. So at this moment, right now as we speak, your unconscious is regulating the functioning in your body. It's pumping blood from your heart, it's digesting your food, it's cleansing the lymph cells, it's healing any cuts, it's counteracting any antibodies that come into the system, and so on and so on. You don't consciously have to think about making your heart beat. Your eyes blink or your lungs fill with oxygen. You don't have to think about that. All this happens unconsciously. So past experiences and what you have learned in life, physically and mentally, are within your unconscious mind. So if I was to ask you to think of your first day at school, or your first kiss or something like that, a representation or series of representations may come to conscious awareness. I say representation because you will never fully remember every detail, and this will be explained when we talk about the model of communication tomorrow. But these representations of past events are located in the unconscious mind. So I asked you to remember something and it came from the unconscious, and then you brought it up into conscious attention and conscious awareness. So the unconscious mind has within it huge, and when I say huge, I can't emphasize enough, it has huge potential for change work, and it's able to learn positive responses and new behaviors so easily. So it's a question of stimulating the unconscious mind by communicating effectively with it to create change at the unconscious level. And that's what we do when we're training and coaching people. We get after we've done like detailed history and we work with people, we get right into the unconscious mind, and that's where we do all our change work. And that's where you have the ability to remove anything that is causing anxiety within you. So yeah, that's a bit about the conscious and the unconscious mind and the critical faculty. Definitely worth looking up. It's absolutely fascinating stuff. So yeah,
it is. I love the wrong way. I love the conscious and the unconscious mind. So sticking with the unconscious mind, the unconscious mind has some prime directives, so like a set of rules that it has to live by, and to help us live by. We don't consciously know of them, but these have been, just gonna click. So the first one is to preserve the body. So as Claire said, you don't consciously, if you have a cut on your finger, you don't have to consciously go heal. It just automatically sends the blood cells and stops the flow of blood, and then creates that layer and the blood clots, and it does that automatically. So we don't consciously have to think about healing the body, it does that. The unconscious mind also is a servant, so it likes to follow orders, and we'll cover this later on in the work, in the masterclass, but it likes to follow orders, and it's important that when you give orders to your unconscious mind, you're clear, like you were talking to a toddler perhaps, because you wouldn't give them a big long sentence of things to do. You would give them short, clear instructions to get them to do a task, and your conscious mind is exactly the same. It's symbolic, so that means it takes meanings from symbols, so that's why there are logos in advertising, because you know the golden arches, and I'm sure as soon as I said that you pictured the McDonald's symbol. So that's why advertising is used, because it goes straight into the unconscious mind, and that's why they use symbols. It keeps memories repressed for protection, and then it will present them for resolution. This is really important, I think, and I noticed when I was talking about the things that I'd been through, when I had a lot of, so in my family there was domestic abuse, and I've repressed those for protection. They've never come, I've cleared all of the negative emotions on them, but I do have some things that have been presented for resolution, but your unconscious mind will only present them when you have the resources to be able to deal with them. I think that's really important. And the unconscious mind doesn't process negatives directly. So if I said, don't think of a blue tree, you will think of a blue tree, because that's how the unconscious mind works. There is a big longer list of the prime directives, which will be covered in our 21-day program, which is a lot more in depth about going into the unconscious mind and all of the things that it does. But yeah, these are the top 5 of the prime directives of the unconscious mind. Off to you, Claire.
Oh, one of my favourite, actually, I find this fascinating more than anything else.
Yeah, me too. I'm really glad we included this, actually.
So this is the mind-body connection. We've included this slide because we think it plays we know it plays a massive role in some dis-ease within the body. For example, fibromyalgia, and there's loads, IBS, all different sort of chronic fatigue syndrome, and we just wanted to share this with you. So our thoughts, feelings, beliefs and attitudes can positively or negatively affect our biological functioning. So in other words, our minds can affect how healthy our bodies are. On the other hand, what we do with our physical body, so what we eat, how much we exercise, even just the way you hold your posture, can impact on your mental state, again, positively or negatively. And this results in a complex interrelationship between our minds and our bodies. So the mind is actually, it's made up of neural pathways, and the neurons fire and transmit energy and chemicals. And as you can see on the picture, not all chemicals transfer across the synaptic space, and the chemicals then enter the bloodstream. So in the case of anxiety or fight or flight, adrenaline and cortisol are released, and these can have a negative effect on the body as they enter the bloodstream. This is actually a really detailed subject, and we will cover more of it when we do our 21-day program. But what we're going to do is, after, like tonight, we'll post a video for you to watch from, and some of you might have heard of Deepak Chopra, and he's actually the person who proved the mind-body connection. And to this day, he's still dedicated to finding out as much info as possible on the subject. He's definitely worth researching if you want more info on what we think is an absolutely fascinating subject. And I know since doing our training and everything that we've done, Claire and I, we can recognise in our own bodies, like we might get a pain, or we might feel sick, we might get a headache, and we can actually now recognise that there's a negative emotion attached to that, and that there's actually something happening in our lives that has actually caused these symptoms to represent, like to come out. It's absolutely fascinating. And once you've sort of looked into it, it will really, really open your minds to what's going on. So yeah, we'll post that video afterwards.
Yeah, and it is really, really, really interesting, because once you know this stuff and you've heard it, then you can kind of identify it as well, because you will notice when your body goes through a period of stress, whether that's stress at work, at home, or just a bad period of time where stuff happens, because stuff happens and it happens to all of us, but it's just how we deal with it. But I noticed after the weeks on the training, I came back and I'd stopped taking my vitamin C powder because I'd forgot to take it up with me, and I came back and I got a cold because I'd gone through a period of stress, and my body's released all of those chemicals into my body, and then that's affected my immune system. So I've become ill with a cold, and I've not had a cold, well, for a good year is how long I've not had a cold. So it just goes to show, after a period of stress, if you're not looking after your body and paying attention to it, it does cause problems. And it is really interesting. In the video we're going to post, there's a couple actually. There's one shorter one which we're definitely going to post, and then if anybody wants any more information, I can post. There's a longer one which goes into a lot more detail, and it has a lot more medical terms in it, but it's still really, really interesting. So I'm just going to unmute everybody. Oh, too far. Did it again. Let's start video again. Hello, hello. Let's turn everybody's voices back on. Unmute all. Hi, so welcome back, everybody. Let me stop the share and see if we can do the video. So, has anybody got any questions?
No.
Okay, so tomorrow we're going to go into more detail about the unconscious mind and the what happens with the information that we take in every second. So that's really a massive part of understanding how we process the information and how we see things. And I think once you guys see that and the stuff we're doing tomorrow, I think you'll find that really useful because it gives you a whole different outlook.
Yeah.
And the other thing we're going to do is to give you, for dealing with anxiety, we have a technique that we still both use. We use it all the time. So I'm going to share with that and teach you how to do that and how to use it. But we were talking earlier, weren't we, Claire, about this technique and when we use it, and actually we both were like, well, I'm always in it now, because it just becomes a new habit. So if there's no questions, we'll say good evening to you all. Thank you all.
I do have one question. So is it every night this week?
Monday to Tuesday and Wednesday, so it's just the 3 evenings.
8
and
o'clock?
It's about 45 minutes or so each one.
At 8 o'clock, yeah?
Yes.
I'm in London on Wednesday, Claire.
Okay, we're going to post it in the group anyway, so you'll be able to see it. So we record them, so you'll be able to see it in the group. Actually, I'm going to